Straw Hut Media.
Hey Rewinders! This is the 75th episode of Release Date Rewind, a podcast that celebrates milestone anniversaries of movies. I'm your host, Mark J. Parker, a film lover and filmmaker, and thank you for listening to this on the Straw Hut Media Network wherever you get your pods, or watching on YouTube. Last time we talked about March movie Cruel Intentions, and we're continuing those themes of romance, heartbreak, and betrayal with this other March movie from 2 decades ago. I know, it's already April, but time is all over the place in this movie, so it's fine. Much like Ariana Grande and her new album, we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of the award-winning 2004 film Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Some of you might have caught the connections and nods to this memorable Michel Gondry movie in Ariana's music videos for Yes and We Can't Be Friends, where her name is Peaches instead of Clementine, and Evan Peters is her Jim Carrey-like ex. Now, if you need to watch or rewatch this movie before continuing, it was just available to stream on Peacock in the US last month, but I see it's been erased already, so you can rent it elsewhere or borrow from your local library or probably find it online somewhere. Alright, lovers and haters, meet me in Montauk, because it's time to rewind. All right, everybody. I'm so excited. A new friend of mine. We've been chatting on Instagram for a while. We've known about each other's shows, but a new friend of mine is on the show today, and I'm so excited because he's a busy podcaster, has multiple shows. Please welcome Antonio Palacios to Release Date Rewind. Hi, Antonio.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's about time we got
I
together.
know.
We're doing this.
Yes, it is about time because we've known each other for probably a couple of years now.
Yeah.
Now, Antonio, you have a few shows. You have to tell us all about them, but I just want to commend you on the app Good Pods. You are always number one. How do you do it?
You know, it's a little bit different now because now I'm in the top 3 because people have learned oh, if we all network and boost each other up, we can move ourselves up. And sometimes I get a little bit lazy and don't boost people up. They don't boost me up. But
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
before people started figuring that out, I think the biggest thing, man, is just put out good shows and keep them
Yeah.
consistent. Because if you miss a
Yeah.
week or if you don't release on the day you tell people you're going to release,
Oh, yeah.
then they get lost in their other routines of what they listen to, and then you miss a whole week. So if there's one thing I've learned about this in the last 3 years, just be consistent, right?
Yep.
Thursday at midnight is when my show comes out, so my listeners know.
Yes, exactly. And now, since you're a dad, we were just talking offline about you're a dad, you have a day job. So, indie podcasters here, things come up. So, how do you stay on schedule with your podcast? Are there ever times when you're like, you know what, I gotta go be a dad, and that episode's just gonna be delayed, or do you just stay up late and still get your content out there on time?
Dude, it's staying ahead. So
Yeah,
four episodes in the bank. So if there's a sick day, you don't miss it.
yeah,
But for me, it's the post-production, getting rid of as much post-production. I'm a guest tonight. It's easy for me to be on the
yeah,
show right now and talk to you. But if you
yep.
were on my show right now, I've got everything done live. I'd be switching angles
Right.
live. I'd be putting
Look
in
at
sound
you.
bites live.
Oh
So
yeah.
I'm not
Wow.
having to spend hours afterwards
Oh,
trying to do all the post-production stuff. Learn it the hard
interesting.
way. Now it's being efficient, dude.
Yeah, wow, you cracked the code. I always am so impressed by the shows that, yeah, have live sound effects. So wow, that's gotta be so hard for you as a host. You want to chat, you're talking about movies, and then you're also you know, clicking buttons, and I
Yeah,
assume,
just
right?
multitasking. It's those video
Wow.
game skills. Like
Yeah.
they told us when we were young, those will never come in handy. You're, but yeah, look at now I can do a soundboard and a laptop and a camera and another
Yeah.
screen and just get it done.
Yes. Oh, that's awesome, Antonio. Very impressive. So yeah, tell us about your shows. Tell us about the Cultworthy. You have a couple
Absolutely.
different spin-offs. Tell us all about them.
So the main show, the one that I started with 3 years ago, where you and I kind of started talking to each
Yeah.
other in the socials, is the Cultworthy Cinema podcast. It's a weekly podcast dedicated to obscure film called Cinema Hidden Treasures. And then lately I've been kind of jumping off the beaten path and doing soundtracks or synth
Oh,
scores, getting a
love
little
it.
bit off the beaten path of cinema. My other show is Back to the Balcony, which is my show on
Yeah.
Siskel and Ebert. So me
Yeah.
and my co-host Justin of the Movie Wire, we critique the critiques of Siskel and Ebert.
I love it so much. That's
So
great.
they watch a movie from the 80s or the early 90s, and we critique their review on it and give our kind of viewpoint. And that's a lot of fun. That one's kind of taking off. Then
Yeah.
my
Good.
other show is called The MILF and Me.
Uh-huh.
And that is a relationship kind of talking shit podcast that I started with a friend of mine who couldn't afford therapy anymore. So we just started doing it as a podcast to get all of the demons out. And
Yeah.
people actually listened and liked it. So that's my third show. Not a movie podcast, but it's still a lot of fun.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So how many is that? That's at least 3. Is
That's
it 4?
3. It used
That's
to be
3.
it used to be 4. I had the
Okay.
Cultworthy Classic,
Yeah.
which was all about old movies, 1970 and earlier. But
Wow.
I reached that point where it's like 4 is too many. So pick your
Yeah.
favorite 3, and one of the children's going in the river. That's pretty much how it worked.
Yeah. Geez. Yeah. That's a lot. I mean, you're doing a lot. This is amazing, Antonio. So when did you first start loving movies? Like, has it been something with you your entire life? Like ever since you were a kid, you just started loving movies?
Yeah, it's a combination of, late millennial, early Gen Xer, latchkey
Yep.
kid, right?
Mm.
So what was the best way to take care of those kids? Here's a Blockbuster card, and here's
Uh-huh.
HBO and Cinemax, and parents that would pretty much let me watch anything as long as it wasn't too erotic.
Ah.
And over time, man, I started building up those VHS tapes of things I dub off of TV, and then that turned
Yeah.
into a physical media collection, and then streaming, and then I was blogging, and now I'm
Oh,
podcasting
yep.
about it. So,
Yep.
yeah,
I know. Isn't it funny how the blogs turned into podcasts? It's
the
so much
progression of
easier,
it, right?
right? It's
I don't
so
have
much.
to
I
type.
mean, yeah, I guess I shouldn't say easier because, like you said, the post-production does take time and, you
Right,
gotta, like, know all your technical stuff, but yeah, the typing and, like, making sure, I don't know, I feel like, speaking, we were let off the hook a little bit more than writing, you really
right.
wanna make sure you have clear sentences and it flows and, there's a little bit more pressure on writing. Anyone can talk, right? That's so funny. I did the same thing with friends. We had a blog, a review blog for TV, and then moved into podcasting, and here I am, right?
There you
Now,
go.
speaking of physical media, I see some great if you're watching on YouTube, everybody, you check out Antonio's background. I see something that warms my heart, and next year, you might just have to come back on the show and talk about Tank Girl. Do I see a Tank Girl soundtrack?
Yeah, so I got the original soundtrack right there, and then
Yeah.
over in comedy, I've got the DVD. I've got the still in its shrink wrapped Blu-ray from Shout Factory from 2012. That's worth like $200. And then I've got Umbrella's new special edition that's coming out in April on pre-order. I'm a Tank
Wow.
Girl whore, dude.
Oh my god, me too. I love it. Let's do it. Let's fall in
Fall
love.
in
Wow.
love.
This is awesome, Antonio. I love it because a lot of people don't know that. That really obviously fell through some cracks. That was pretty kinda underground, but
Yeah.
I love that you love it. So you have multiple copies. That's a shrink wrapped. Wow, you ever
Yeah.
gonna sell it? I guess
Uh,
only if you really need to.
if I really need to. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my god, that's awesome. I love it so much. I
it's
love
it's a
seeing good
fetish
physical
property right
collections.
now, right?
Yeah. Yes, yes, that's awesome. That is so cool. And you're Mountain Time, so where do you live?
It's Utah.
Utah. Wow, I still have
Yeah.
never been to Utah. I'm in Southern Maine, was in New York for a long time where this movie we're about to talk about obviously takes place.
Mhm.
Wow, Utah. Where in Utah?
Salt Lake City, so the main hub.
Wow, cool. All
Yeah.
right. Do you watch The Housewives of Salt Lake?
No, but I've seen them around. I've actually been in a few bars when they came and started filming and, like, kicked a
No
bunch of us
way.
out, yeah.
Oh my god. Wow, it's a really good one. If you ever wanna just, like, dive in, this last season of Real Housewives of Salt Lake was total fire. I mean, I don't know how it's kinda like the pinnacle of that whole franchise. So, wow, good for you, Salt Lake. It looks beautiful. I gotta visit one day.
Yeah, come out
I
one day.
gotta.
Come sit
Yeah,
in the
it looks
studio, we'll do a
awesome.
podcast together.
Love it, yes. Now your studio's at your house, I assume, or do you, like, have
Yep.
a
No, we just
Yeah,
got
love
a
it.
bedroom, turned it from my media room, office room, now into a studio. Got
I
4
love it.
mics set up and lights and all that stuff like that, yeah. It
Yeah. Good for
Never
you.
thought it was going to go that direction, and that's where we're at.
Yep, exactly. I know. Well, also, as podcasters, we know, like, and maybe you're the same, but I'm noticing, and I've said this before on the show, like, video is getting more and more and more popular
You
of
got to
this
jump on it.
format,
Yeah,
right? So
you got to
yeah,
jump on it.
I've had this show since, what was it? September 2020 is when I started Release Date Rewind, but I didn't really do video seriously until a couple years into it. So
Yeah.
was a little delayed, but absolutely, you got to have your lighting and everything, and it looks good, right?
Well, thank you.
Hello, I'm Howard Mirziak, founder and president of Lacuna Incorporated. Why remember a destructive love affair? Here at Lacuna, we have perfected a safe, effective technique for the focused erasure of troubling memories. In a matter of hours, our patented non-surgical procedure will rid you of painful memories and allow you a new and lasting peace of mind you'd never imagined possible.
Let's rewind, everybody. 20 years ago. Holy cow. I can remember 20 years ago so well. How old were you, Antonio? What were you doing 20 years ago?
I was 23 when this came out.
Wow. Okay, cool.
Mhm.
I was about to be 17. I was in the last few days of 16 in high school, junior year, and in comes Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. March 19th, 2004, everybody. I'm going to set the scene real quick for you, Antonio. This is a couple things going on, a couple pop culture things going on at this time to jog our memory, okay?
Mhm.
The top song was actually, I hate to admit it, it's one of my least favorite songs. I hate when I hear this song. Yeah, by Usher with Lil Jon and Ludacris.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just so repetitive, and I'm like, I can't believe this is a song. Even when it came out, I was like, okay. But we know 2004 was like the year of Usher. He was actually just days away from releasing his Confessions album. And looking at the Billboard like top songs of the year, he had so many. It was him with Alicia Keys, My Boo, which of course they just sang on the
Mhm.
Super Bowl. He was on top of the world. So how funny. Yeah. So totally different vibe than this movie. Isn't it funny? Yale was number one. Other popular movies at this time, and I want to hear your thoughts, Antonio. This came out the same day as a remake I love, actually, Dawn of the Dead. What do you think of
Mhm.
Dawn of the Dead?
Yeah.
Snyder film. Yeah,
It's like the only Zack Snyder film I actually really like.
right?
And
Yeah,
I
it's
saw it in
kind
the
of
theater opening day too. Yeah.
exactly me too. I remember that theater was packed. I saw Eternal Sunshine in the theater. I assume you saw this in the theater as well.
When I get to my story, I'll let you know all about it. Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. Hold on to that thought. Yeah, I saw this in the theater with my dad. We went to go see a lot of kind of more indie art house movies, which was great. But yeah, Dawn of the Dead, saw it with my friend Liz Martin, opening night, packed house. I loved it. I actually wrote about it in a college application essay, I remember later that year. So funny. But that came out the same day. So did Taking Lives with Angelina Jolie and Ethan Hawke, a
Mhm.
movie I kinda can't remember too well. I know it was like a twisty thriller. I didn't love it. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, it wasn't that great. I think the thing that pops out in my head mostly about it, apart from the nudity, it's the first time I
Mhm.
saw Paul Dano in a movie.
Oh,
He's
was
the
he in that?
he's the kid at the very beginning. He plays the young version of the killer as he takes his first life. And I was like, that's the most interesting son of a bitch I've ever
Mm,
seen in my life. And then a
mhm.
couple years later, he was in Little Miss Sunshine. I'm like, oh, that's the guy. And
Yes.
yeah, ever
And now, I
since.
mean, right? He's so
And
good. It's funny,
now,
right after Little Miss Sunshine, I interned at Fox Searchlight, which did
mhm.
Little Miss Sunshine, and I realized after my internship ended that all along I was interning with his sister, Sarah, who also
Oh.
works in an industry, I think doing wardrobe. So how funny, because she kept talking to like our bosses and they were so friendly. And I'm like, what's the history there? And then I see her last name. I'm like, oh no, it can't be. And then I realized, oh yeah, that's his sister. How funny. Yeah, I love Paul Dano. Awesome actor. My gosh. Yeah. Wow. Good memory. Did not
Yeah.
remember him in that one at all. That's amazing. But I do remember the nudity. You're right. I forgot. Angelina shows some skin, and yeah, I just remember there's like a weird twist at the end that I can't really remember what happens, but
It's not that weird. It's actually pretty cliche. We all saw it coming,
uh
but
okay. Yeah.
it
There you go.
surprised my mom. So I think maybe that was the audience they were going for, you know?
Okay. Yeah, totally. But other popular movies back in March 2004 were The Passion of the Christ. Oh boy, never saw that one. Did you check that one out?
I did not get on the bandwagon of the theatrical release. I did wait for
Yeah.
DVD on that one.
Okay.
It
Yeah,
was
I still to this
passionate.
day. Oh, I believe it from all the trailers. I still to this day have not seen that one, but I'll never forget we were doing, I want to say this year was Carousel, was the school musical in high
Oh
school,
my.
and our lead actor saw this movie opening night, and word got back to our director, who was also the choir teacher at school, and she was, oh my gosh, I wrote a play about her. She this teacher was too much, so intense, drill sergeant. She had like sort of like a production meeting, like an assembly with the whole cast and crew, because this was like the week leading up to the musical. And she was
Right.
like, I have heard that some of you went to see the very intense movie Passion of the Christ, and I am very disappointed. She was so mad because and it's so funny because it's like, who cares? The play opens in like a week, but
She thought it was going to
she
affect your performance.
exactly, exactly. And
Oh my
my
God.
friends and I were just sitting there, we're like, okay, this is ridiculous. That's how she was. So I never saw the movie, but I remember so well sitting in the theater, hearing her scream at us for seeing Passion of the Christ. So there you go. But other popular movies, Starsky and Hutch with Ben Stiller and Owen
Oh, yeah.
Wilson, Secret Window, which I do remember I liked with Johnny Depp. That was a
Mhm.
good little thriller. And 50 First Dates. Of course, that was Sandler and Barrymore in their second outing together after The Wedding Singer. So those were all within the top 10. And here comes Eternal Sunshine. So, Antonio, I'm going to throw it over to you like I do with every guest in your own words. It doesn't need to be long. Tell me, what is Eternal Sunshine about? And I know this one's a little complicated. We're jumping all around, but what's it about?
I mean, I think you could just say in a nutshell, it is about the pain of breakups, but I think
Mm,
it's even deeper than that. I think it's about the pain of accepting when you're not with the right person.
mm,
And even more so than that, are you going to choose to ignore that fact in terms of science, where
mm,
science is now involved, where Charlie Kaufman kind of is so great about exposing the raw humanity of people to the point where like he is probably taking every inner demon he's ever had and putting it on page. And that's
mm,
what this feels like, where it's like, I know I was with the wrong person, or maybe I was attracted to the wrong person. So what would happen if no longer could I remember them or they could remember me? And would we naturally be inclined to come back to each other?
mm.
Which back when this came out, we didn't have the social media and the TikToks about people talking about toxic relationships or
Right.
like toxic
You're so
wants
right.
and all these different connections. And now people are more hyper aware of that stuff. So I think some of them use that to their advantage and avoid relationships. But it's that whole thing where they say, it's not he's not the problem, he's the pattern.
Mm,
That's what this movie is about, is that people fall into patterns subconsciously that even science sometimes can't defeat that. So I think
yeah.
that's what it's about more than
Wow.
anything.
Yeah, wow, well said. You're so right. This came out, I mean, we see, cassette tapes, right? Everything's on
Mhm.
cassette tapes, and this movie is not that old. I mean, by
No,
then we were long getting away from cassette tapes, so I guess that's just Michel Gondry's just love of, like, 80s, media, because of course he did a lot of music videos and everything, but, you're so right. This was before social media where we were not as, advanced, not as, learned
we
about,
were we weren't self-diagnosing ourselves either.
yes, totally. You're so right. Yeah, Google wasn't even around from what I remember. Google came a few years later. Even the term Google it, we had like AOL, where we could search around, but you're right. Our internet usage was much more limited. So you're right. We'll be right back.
I'm Clementine, by the way.
I'm Joel.
Hi, Joel. No jokes about my name.
A year or two before this movie came out, one of the biggest selling books in the world was the book He's Just Not That Into You,
Great.
which was
Yes.
one of those books that got women starting to like look for red flags or create
Mm,
red flags. And in some weird way, I want to say that this was Charlie Kaufman's like attack on that mentality. It's kind of
interesting.
his revenge coming from the viewpoint of a heartbroken man of, are the red flags really me, or am I dealing with a person that doesn't know how to not see red flags and just
Mm,
creates red flags? And I'm going to get deep on it when we get into a little bit, but that's,
wow.
I think, really fits in with that time where you've got two different sets of consciousnesses consciousness going on here. You have younger females and maybe older females reading that book and really thinking differently about relationships, and like, he's just not that into you, so don't waste your time. And then meanwhile, you've got, in my opinion, the birth of the incel movement. You've got men who don't know how to communicate with women, and then they're figuring out, okay, I need to be better on a higher level so I can understand what game of chess they're playing with me emotionally and psychologically. And then you've got men who just want to shut down. And this is the science fiction version of that. What's the best way to shut down? Wipe my mind clean of the heartbreak that I had.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Joel would be
This
an
is amazing.
incel if that was not a procedure he could do.
Okay. That's so interesting, Antonio. Yeah. We'll keep going in a second. I'm going to pause the deep dive, and now I'm just going to quickly introduce our main players. We're going to talk about what they were up to around this time, and then we are going to keep nerding out and keep digging and diving in, because Antonio is giving me life right now. Okay, so we mentioned the director, Michel Gondry. He had directed lots of shorts, lots of music videos, everyone from Kylie Minogue, which, by the way, he directed a music video I loved. I think it was called Come Into My World that she sang.
It's great.
You remember that? She's just kind of, I think it's like a 360 camera. It's kind of just a circle, right? But we keep seeing her multiply. Oh my gosh. My young mind was like, this is so simple, but so cool, so effective, right? He did that. He worked with her, the White Stripes, Radiohead, Bjork, Bjork was apparently in the running for the Kate Winslet role, which is very interesting. Yes. Also Daft Punk, lots and lots of people, right? And he had directed one previous feature. His feature directorial debut was a couple years earlier, called Human Nature. I haven't seen that one. That's with Tim Robbins, Patricia Arquette, and Rosie Perez. Have you seen that?
Rosie Perez, and it is a Charlie Kaufman script as well. It was the one that he essentially got made after Malkovich. Essentially, what that movie is Patricia Arquette was born with a condition where she just grows hair all over her body and is constantly shaving it and lasering it off. And she falls in love with Tim Robbins, who's just this nerdy scientist who's trying to teach mice table manners. They're out on a walk in the woods, and as she's out there, she runs into a man who was raised as a feral child. So he's essentially a Tarzan character of the New York woods. And they form a connection. They fall in love, and then Tim Robbins thinks that, hey, if I can train mice to have table manners, why can't I train this feral child man to be civilized? That's the premise. It's fun, and it's definitely a Michel Gondry, more like his music videos. It's got more of that Bjork video feel, where this one's a little bit more serious and a little bit more avant-garde.
That's so interesting. Wow. Yeah, Human Nature did not, I guess maybe I was just too young, right? It didn't really have much of a mark.
Limited release. Like, I had to see it at our like little independent theater down here. It didn't play wide.
Okay. Yeah, and apparently, maybe you saw this too. I saw that when Michelle was really bringing Jim Carrey on, it was around the time that Human Nature was coming out. So this had obviously been in the works for a few years. And I guess he even told Jim Carrey, like, I guess he had him sign like a napkin saying, please promise that you're going to stick with Eternal Sunshine, even when Human Nature comes out in a couple weeks and it's going to flop and make no money, right? Yeah. So, and they didn't care. He and Kate Winslet were like, whatever, I don't care about that. So that's kind of funny. But yeah, so he did Human Nature. Moving over to Charlie Kaufman, like you said, wow, he was definitely having a hot streak with being John Malkovich, which turns 25 later this year, right? He wrote Human Nature. He wrote Adaptation. Got an Oscar nom for that. Confession of a Dangerous Mind. I forgot he wrote that. That's the one with George Clooney and Sam Rockwell, a whole bunch of people.
It's
right?
the Chuck Barris biography movie.
Yep. I think Julia and back to Drew Barrymore. Exactly. So yeah, he had written those kind of like, one each year. He was on a streak. Right. And someone else that was involved in the script with Kaufman and Michel Gondry is Pierre Bismuth. And he apparently, I guess this idea kind of actually started with him. I was reading that he conceived of the idea back in the late 90s. And so he was, I guess, talking to a friend. And when he asked her, if she would ever erase her ex-boyfriend from her memory, she was complaining about a bad breakup. She said, yes, hell yes. And so he brought this to Gondry, and then Gondry approached Charlie Kaufman. And Kaufman, I guess, was nervous about this idea because of Christopher Nolan. Memento had come out
Mhm.
around the time they were talking, right? That was a good few years earlier, around 2000. And so Kaufman was like, this is a little similar, where, it's a narrative that's all disjointed with time and memories. And he actually tried to, I guess, get out of it, tried to pull out of the project.
Wow.
But luckily he stuck through it because he ended up winning an Oscar for writing this great script. They all won Oscars, right? Because it's story by. And apparently, the original title that Charlie Kaufman wanted to give it, I couldn't find if it's out there, but he does say it was 18 words long, and he purposely wanted a title that you couldn't possibly fit on a marquee. So there you go. So Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, that's still pretty long, but I guess not as long as what he originally wanted.
You like?
You look like a tangerine.
This cast, Antonio, is so perfect. Do you agree? Do you love, I just feel like everyone is perfectly placed in their roles.
I agree with some caveats, but we can get to that when we start jumping in.
Okay, good. All right. Interesting. So obviously our star, Jim Carrey, he had just done Bruce Almighty the year before. So big comedy, what he was known for. I just talked about his huge 1994, 10 years prior, with all of his massive comedies when he became a mega movie star. So he had just done Bruce Almighty. Kate Winslet had just done The Life of David Gale, which I remember was a polarizing one. I've only seen it once. I remember that ending was quite dark and shocking. So that was a movie. Kirsten Dunst, who I am a big fan of. I am a Kirsten stan. I think she's good in everything. I think it's crazy she hasn't gotten more noms in her career.
I know, right?
Right? I mean, Melancholia. I mean, all these movies, right? She had just done Mona Lisa Smile, going back to Julia Roberts. And of course, this was during her Spider-Man tenure. So later in 2004, just a couple months later, she was going to do Spider-Man 2, which I was obsessed with. Mark Ruffalo, how funny to see him looking so young. Of course, this was before he really, really blew up, but he was definitely on the rise, doing some really good work. He was just with Meg Ryan in that movie In the Cut, which was, I never saw it, but was super kind of sultry and seedy, right?
It's sultry and seedy. And what was funny is that in that movie, the way they make him look, he looks 10 years older. And then to see him in this one right after that came out, I was like, oh, that's the same guy. But
yeah. That's a good point. Cause I remember, starting to understand who he was. He was newer to at least more bigger things, but yeah, he was a true chameleon. Like I never got a sense of age. Are you in your 20s? Are you 30s or 40s? Right. And he was about to blow up even more right after this. A month after was 13 going on 30 with Jennifer Garner. Such a fun one. And he also was in We Don't Live Here Anymore. That was at the festivals around this time and about to come out. I remember seeing that because the cast also for that was so good. Him, Laura Dern, Naomi Watts. But I think I haven't seen it since I saw it in theaters. I think it just was, and that was around the time it came out at the same time of Closer, which was couples swapping, right? We had and I didn't love either movie, but maybe I should check them out again. I mean, I was a teen when I saw them. They just weren't my cup of tea,
I haven't seen Closer since. Also, one of the film that he was in the same year, he had a big year, is he was in Michael Mann's Collateral.
Oh my gosh, yes.
In a brief role as one of the cops that's trying to figure out what's going on between the cab driver and the hitman.
Collateral, so good.
Yeah,
that
and then
came
he
out
had
later
Zodiac a year or two after that. So just big decade for that guy.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's fun to see because obviously he was just nominated for Poor Things, so it's fun to see a great actor's journey and how it does take 20 years sometimes to get your nominations, but man, he doesn't do a bad job in anything. So interesting. And then another actor I love, Elijah Wood, looking so young, so young. I mean, he always looks young. It's crazy. I don't know if you have watched Yellow Jackets. Not the best show. I know I'm going to get hate for that. People love that show, but he was just in season 2 and he basically looks the same, but it's just funny to see him.
He's my age. So I've always compared myself age-wise, okay, how old is Elijah Wood looking and how old am I looking?
That's funny.
And Natalie Portman, same too. She's a month younger than me. So the three of us, that's how I kind of all right, where am I aging compared to these guys?
And geez, that can get overwhelming because those two don't age. They have
they don't.
looked that way for 20 years plus, it's amazing.
Easy,
But it's just funny to see, him with his long sideburns. And he's I forgot he's kind of like a villain in this. We'll
get to that.
Yeah, totally. Dirty. But he, of course, had just wrapped up Lord of the Rings, another mega franchise of the early 2000s. Crazy how they just pushed him out year after year. So he had just wrapped up with that. And then last but not least, Tom Wilkinson, another great actor, sadly just passed
Rest in
away.
peace. Yeah, just
Yeah,
barely.
he December 30th, he passed away. And I guess, because of the holidays, I missed that. I didn't even realize until maybe only a month or two ago. I'm like, oh crap, that sucks because he's great. I love him in The Bedroom, Batman Begins. I mean, he's great in everything. He
Michael
had just
Clayton was
done
such a good
oh,
performance of his
uh-huh.
too. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep, Michael Clayton, him and Tilda. I love Tilda. Yeah, great actors in that cast for sure.
This is a hoax, right?
I assure you no.
You voted for this movie in my poll, I
Yeah.
noticed. And that's when I was like, oh, this might finally be the chance to get Antonio on the show. So why'd you vote for it?
I voted for it because I wanted to rewatch it as a healed person. So I'm going to get into my little story really fast. So
Yes, tell me.
my birthday is March 22nd. So this
Oh,
came
wow.
out
Happy
right.
belated.
Oh, yeah, just barely.
Yeah.
So it was right after this came out.
Mhm.
So I was in a very, 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 in my opinion, healthy relationship.
Okay.
We had just moved in together. I was like going to marry this girl in my mind and all that romantic stuff that happens. We had seen 50 First Dates just like barely, right?
Mhm.
I went away to Vegas for a few days on a business trip. And when I came back, all of her stuff was packed in the living room. She had decided
No.
we had moved too fast and she wanted to move back home.
Oh.
So she essentially broke up with me like the day after my birthday. So 50 First Dates, romantic movie, we're in love. I'm gone for a few days, come back, all the stuff's packed away, and she moves out.
Oh.
But we did what people sometimes do in relationships. It's like, okay, well, maybe let's just scale it back a little bit. Maybe we can go back to like a friend zone type thing and maybe rebuild.
Yeah.
So what did my dumbass do? I said, well, let's go watch the new Jim Carrey movie.
Uh-oh.
So this is like a week after the breakup. It's still raw. It still
yeah.
hurts. And I feel like we're not getting back together as quickly as I thought we would be.
Mhm.
And this movie was the nail in the coffin. I didn't know what it was about. Like I knew it was
Right.
about erasing memories. If you watch the trailer's very, I mean, like you said, it goes to ELO's
Yeah. Mr. Blue Sky.
Mr. Blue Sky. It's jaunty. It doesn't
Yeah.
focus on the drama that the movie actually carries.
Right.
And so we sat and we watched that movie in silence together.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
the funny moments, I couldn't even laugh. And then after the movie was over, like we had separate cars, we drove away, and honestly, never spoke to her again in person.
Wow.
She just did not want to meet up. So this movie was, in my opinion, the catalyst for that relationship to never get better. So I avoided it for years, bro, because I thought
Right.
that it was like a cursed film.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe a decade later, I watched it again and realized I still wasn't healed because the feelings were still there.
Yeah,
Even though
of
I knew
course.
the movie was fantastic. And now here we are 20 years later. And in the last 2 years, I've probably watched it 3 or 4 times because
Oh, wow.
I'm healed now.
Yeah.
I'm over that, and I can recognize it for what it is and actually see the nuances in the characters and in the film, where before I was just looking at how I was internalizing the message, right?
You were looking at yourself and how it attached to you. And yeah, absolutely. Oh, gosh, Antonio, that is so fascinating. This movie came out kind of at like the best and the worst time in your life.
Right. Because now I can like analyze it, watch it, and enjoy it for the first
Yeah.
time in 20 years.
Yeah. How long were you guys together?
Like 5 years.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, it was a
Wow,
long one. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and you guys were young. So
We were really young. Well, we
this was a
start
big
young in
deal.
Utah.
Oh, yeah, true. That's true. Wow. And it's so interesting that you brought up the trailer and how it is jaunty. It's fun. We know it's quirky and the movie is extremely quirky. But yeah, the trailer, much like my friend Austin on Instagram was telling me today, he's like, yeah, that trailer, it's misleading. And I'm like, you think? And then I watched it again. I'm like, actually, yeah, you don't fully know how hard this movie will hit you.
Right.
Because, and I get it, it's kind of hard to fully show exactly what you're going to get into in this movie because it's all over the place in the greatest way. But yeah, it's jaunty, it's fun, it's upbeat. You don't really know just how hard it can be watching some of these scenes, especially if
The
you
rawness, yeah.
right, are going through some raw breakup. Wow. So that was the last time you guys ever spoke. Do you ever see each other online or no? Like, you're not
Let
new?
it go.
Yep, let it go. Wow. Well, I'm very glad you're healed, and it sounds like obviously you have a great life, got good people around you, so I'm
Yeah.
glad. Obviously, time does heal all wounds. It's
Mhm.
funny because I was a little younger than you, but later in 2004, and it's so funny to say like, "Oh, I was 17 and it was this short, relationship in high school," but it lingered for a while, Sometimes it's funny, it really does show you that, like, some relationships like yours, you're together for 5 years, some, like, I was a few months for me, but whoa, there were wounds and,
Yeah.
it's just crazy, and I remember rewatching this movie because I got it on DVD later in the year, and much like you, then all I could kinda see was still a great movie, but whoa, like, I couldn't get out of my own way. I was, Joel, I was Jim Carrey, right?
Yeah.
Dealing with, like, all these memories, yeah, and also it's the kind of thing where even if it's not a breakup, if it's a loss or whatever, you look at items around your house, I mean, everything has memories connected to it, right? Like my dog's getting old and I'm already he's okay, but he's going to be 14 and I know when the day comes I am going to be a wreck. I'm going to look at things around this room I'm in my basement and I'm going to be like, "Oh my god, that's my dog. That's and it's just crazy how our minds just see things and we attach memories to them, you
Well,
know?
I love that the fact that they do point that out,
Mhm.
maybe not obviously, but for someone who's actually paying attention, that this company, Lacuna, isn't
Mhm.
necessarily just for breakups. Like when you
Right.
looked in that lobby, there's people who are like holding urns and shit. Like it's
Absolutely.
for just people that want to rid themselves of trauma and bad memories, which
Mhm.
that's where I'm still kind of on the fence. Is like,
Mm.
is that the proper thing to do, or are we supposed to deal with that naturally and heal on our own? And it's like, well,
Mm.
what's the difference of that and then people who are taking anti-anxiety medication or drinking themselves? Like,
Mm,
there's
okay.
different remedies for different people. I'm not saying that one is right and one is wrong. I'm just saying that and it's part of the message that I don't think a lot of people notice,
Mm,
is that this is kind of a blanket treatment for all people that don't necessarily, it's not the best treatment for them. And that's
mm,
why they have those stipulations in the contracts of like, no, you can't get your memory wiped after 2 months. Like
right. Yeah, I love that line.
Kaufman was smart enough to realize that this could be like anything, something that people become dependent on, and feel free
Right.
to go and make new mistakes and have more tragedies and more heartbreak. And then, well, it doesn't matter because I'm just gonna go get my mind wiped anyway.
You're
Like
right.
that's a nuance to it that it's in the movie, but it's not put at the forefront. So I don't think it's
Mhm.
recognized that often.
Yeah, very well said. I totally agree with you because I love that line. Even wrote it down in my notes. I think she says something like, "No, Mrs. Whatever." Oh yeah, you can have the procedure done 3 times in 1 month.
Right.
No. And she's not even on camera saying that. I think that's when, like you're
It's
saying,
off camera. Yeah.
she's off camera and we're seeing Joel come in and we see like the woman in tears holding a box. I think maybe her dog died. Like we're seeing different forms of grief, let's say, right? So yeah, it's such an interesting choice to not even have that line on camera and to not state more rules like that. Like
Hmm.
when he's signing the paperwork, like you can only do this once or but yeah, that's a really interesting connection to drinking your sorrows away or going on medication because but at least that, I mean, drinking, we can black out and forget what happened, but you still can't forget the breakup or the grief, right? That happened before the drinking. You know what I mean? And going back to your question, like, are we like if this is real, are we ever really supposed to do this? I would say the movie tells us by the end, no,
No.
because you have Kirsten Dunst, which I love that twist. And
Hmm.
don't worry, we're gonna spoil everything. People, obviously, spoilers are all over this show, but I have to tell you, and I remembered this well, but I love it even more rewatching this. It had been a while since I rewatched. It had been a good few years for sure. But when Tom Wilkinson's wife, what a great small role. And when she says, you already had my husband,
Yeah. You could
right?
have
Like,
him. You
right? You
had
can
him.
have him.
Yeah.
You did, right? Tell the poor girl what you did to her, right? And how then young Mary, Kirsten Dunst, the assistant in the office, she takes matters into her own hands and she takes all the files. Oh my gosh. And she's basically burning down the company in a way, clearing everyone out and sending them their files. So that's number one of like, yeah, this isn't meant to be. She's doing something impulsive, much like Clementine, but like she is taking matters into her own hands to give people back what she wishes she knew. You know what I mean?
What's great, bro, is that I just barely listened to your Cruel Intentions episode.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
It's essentially the same thing.
Mm.
Like her exposing and shutting the company down by giving everyone their memories
Oh my
back
gosh. I love it.
is essentially the same ending as the journal getting spread around the school.
Wow. Oh my God. Brilliant. See, this is why I do this show. I love seeing the connections. You're so right. Right? The March movies have a little connection there, exposing secrets, relationship
Right.
secrets,
It didn't
right?
have Bittersweet Symphony playing, but it
No.
could have, and it would
But
have
we
worked.
do. You're right. Actually, it totally could have just copied that. But we do have that great Beck cover.
Yeah, we
Everyone's
do.
gotta learn, right? Oh,
Yeah.
the beginning of it is so. This ending, I still remember seeing this in the theater, and at the end, smiling because it's a happy ending, even though it's also sad. The song is mellow, it's a little more downbeat, right? And how they both look at each other and they're like, and that was my second reason for why we're not supposed to do this memory erasing thing. It's
Mhm.
not meant to be, because they literally have proof that they did this procedure thanks to Mary, right? And they still can't walk away from each other. And Kate Winslet, she says, "I'm gonna find things to hate about you. You're gonna be boring. You're gonna hate me." And he just says, "Okay." And she's like, "Okay."
Are you sure?
I'm so sure.
And then there they are running off in the snow and they're doing it all over again. Now, what do you think, Antonio? Because I love that last shot as we're hearing the song. We're seeing them running and playing in the snow 3 times before the screen goes complete white. So do you think they did the procedure again and again, or is that too literal? What do you make of that last shot?
That's a hot topic amongst people who debated this film. Like, how
Yeah.
many times have they done this? The same way people always debate on the end of Inception. It's like, was it
Mhm.
all a dream or was it not? It's the same kind of thing.
Right.
I think that the interpretation is that Mary did shut the company down, so
Mhm.
they can't do it again.
Mm.
If they do, maybe it's another company that started up, but that's just going way too deep.
Mm.
Um, the way I look at it is I think that they both know that no matter what, the relationship is doomed because it goes back to my point of like, you can fall in love with someone over and over and over again. It doesn't change the fact that they're the wrong person for you,
Mm.
right? That's what
Mhm.
time with someone actually proves. I think the most brilliant part of the movie, man,
Mm.
is when Joel meets her for the first time, she's got green hair.
Mhm.
And to me, that represents like this is a fresh start. And then when they're together, it goes from like a red to the tangerine.
Right.
It's in like the warming phase of the relationship. And then once they break up, everything's gone cold and now
It's
she's
blue.
blue.
Yeah.
I've always
Mhm.
looked at that interpretation of that relationship. That pattern doesn't end,
Mm.
because she's probably a borderline personality.
Mm.
She's got that manic pixie syndrome that so
Right.
many girls in the 90s had.
Mhm.
And he is a pushover who will honestly always let her have her way. He will never
Mhm.
break up with her ever, but he will just sit there and resent her more and more as he does throughout the movie. And if
Yeah.
he resents her so much, then why is he so heartbroken? It's because
Mm.
he's a lonely dude who's only gonna ever just attach himself to the person who is attracted to him.
That's so interesting. Yeah, and he even says early on in the film when we think they're meeting for the first time, right? They're sitting
Right.
at like the diner in Montauk, and we hear his voiceover. He says, "Why do I fall for every woman who just gives me the littlest bit of attention?" Something like that.
And I've
Yes.
been there, man. I've been that guy.
Yeah.
So it's easier for me to recognize that and see that as long as he keeps like the whole point is he had to have his heart shattered because that's the
Mhm.
only way he's ever going to be stronger. And then having
Mhm.
his memory wiped was actually a detriment to his growth.
Mm.
So the ending isn't as much as a walk off into the sunset. It's really the run down the snowy beach, back to the apartment to probably replay everything all over again. But it's
Mm,
not a memory wipe. It's a brand new thing that's actually the same. It's
mm,
what the Ouroboros. It's a snake eating its own tail. It's a never ending
yes.
cycle. They don't
Yep.
need the memory wipe to have that happen.
You're trying to figure out, did I have sex with someone tonight?
Isn't that how you get people to like you?
I was hoping for it to be clear to me on this latest rewatch, and it still isn't, and I'm okay with it. But how long do you think Clementine and Joel were together before breaking up? It's a year or maybe more? What do you think?
I think it's probably a couple years,
Okay.
because it's long enough for him to create friendships with her social network,
Right.
like David
Yeah.
Cross's character and his wife,
Yeah. They're
which
great.
it's such a short scene for them, but they're great and they do so much for the film.
Mhm.
But
Absolutely. I love when she throws the laundry at him. Oh my gosh. That is such fire, and it's totally married life, you know? It's great. Yeah.
I it could be a year. Like I go back to the phrase that I've heard before in, relationship therapy and stuff like that is date through the seasons.
Mhm.
You have to date someone through at least 3 seasons to understand who they are. And I think maybe the
Interesting, yeah.
hair color is a
Mhm.
reference to that, an analogy to that. So it could have been
Yep.
less than a year,
Yeah,
but it
I was
feels
only
like
thinking
longer because
yeah.
their tensions are so high.
Yeah, yeah, it feels like yeah, I totally agree because by the end of it, I mean, holy cow, they hate each other. He's saying that she's a slut, sleeping around with whoever gives her attention, and then he does that like ketchup blood on the neck, and she's like, I think she even says like, "I'm revolted by you" or something like that.
Yeah.
So it does feel like it's been a long time. But I was just thinking, oh, has it been a year? Because they, well, no, I guess not. Because now
Well,
I'm
here's
getting
the
my
thing.
timelines
Well, maybe
confused.
maybe I accidentally stumbled on upon something. Maybe they did
Mm,
date through the seasons, and green is spring, and
yep,
red is summer, and orange is fall, and
yep,
then they break up in the winter where now her hair
yep.
is blue. Maybe
Mhm.
Kaufman was actually digging deeper into that than I actually gave him credit for.
Yeah, mhm, mhm. Because then they meet again, and she's got blue hair. Because it's only really been what's interesting is he
It's like a
gets the
couple weeks.
procedure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting. He gets the procedure by these guys, um, and then it's as if, because the movie starts with him waking up, he's waiting for the train to go into the city for work, but goes to Montauk, and so then once he gets the procedure and it's done, and we're towards the end of the film, he wakes up, waits for the train to go to work, and goes to Montauk. So it almost feels like it's the day after he got the procedure that
It
then
is.
he meets, right? And that also is another reason why it's like this procedure is not meant to be. This is not what we should be doing because no matter what, you're going to immediately do what you just did the day after you get it done to your brain. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Whoa, careful. Come on, step back. Roach the guy.
I was watching through the credits because I always feel like, especially in the special thanks, there's always like a name in there that's like, huh. And I saw Ellen Pompeo's name from Grey's Anatomy. And I didn't realize until today. I guess she had shot at least one scene as Naomi, who we only
Oh,
ever hear about. Yeah.
interesting.
Yes,
Yeah.
Ellen Pompeo. And apparently Michel Gondry cast her. And this is another interesting thing, timeline wise. He cast her in at least a one scene role as Naomi because he thought she looked a lot like Renee Zellweger, who Jim Carrey was dating and had just broken up with soon before
Ooh,
shooting.
that's correct.
So I
Yeah.
guess he wanted to, play with Carrie's emotions there. And I guess they do kind of look a little alike, but I guess at the time Michel Gondry said, like, she looks so much like Renee, he had to have her. But then she was cut. So I guess they shot footage. So that's why she got a special thanks. There were a few people. I also saw Kevin Dillon's name in there. In the special thanks, randomly. Couldn't find much info on him. Not in the special thanks is Tracy Morgan, who I guess did shoot scenes as Joel's one of his neighbors. But I guess he was too distracting, so they cut him.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I do love that neighbor and how we only see him twice in the movie, by the mailboxes, but how we meet him when Joel is grieving the breakup. It's like the day before Valentine's Day,
Yeah.
right?
It's like,
And
"Oh,
then
you're so lucky to have Clementine."
Clementine, right? And the look Jim Carrey gives him is just, oh, yikes, too soon, right? And then we meet him again when Clem enters the apartment building and he goes, "Oh, Clementine, good to see you."
Right.
And she has no idea
No
who he
idea who
is,
he is.
right? brilliant. Oh my gosh, what a great I love this movie so much. All right, so now tell me, it sounds like, Antonio, you have a couple problems maybe with the cast, or what are some caveats you have?
As I've been rewatching it, I think one of the things that really kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and it's not
Mm,
necessarily the actor's fault. It's some of the characters are just kind of disgusting, and they're supposed to be. Patrick
mm,
is the villain. Patrick is so
mhm.
bad, but they don't do anything to make you sympathize for him at all. It'd be different if they
Mm,
got you to like him. And what we kind of learned from the very beginning is no one really likes Patrick. Like
mhm,
Tom Wilkinson doesn't like Patrick, and Mary doesn't like Patrick.
mhm.
And I think that Mark Ruffalo just accepts Patrick, you know?
Yeah,
But
barely.
at the same time, he's like, yeah, just go meet your girlfriend. I got this. Like, it's more of like Patrick is a hindrance.
Yeah.
I think Elijah is so damn likable. It
Mm,
makes me feel like that part was maybe a little bit miscast because especially when he and Clementine are on the ice and he's trying to reenact the moment that he read about in the
yes.
journal,
Mhm.
it's it doesn't feel mischievous enough. It doesn't
Mm,
feel devious enough. I felt like someone with a little bit more, I don't know, less likability would have done better in that role.
yep,
But
that's a great point.
that's just my opinion. He's
Mhm.
still fantastic. I just think it was written for someone with a little bit more uh hate in their heart, right?
Yeah, a little more edge. You know what's so
Yeah.
interesting? And, now that you say it, I completely agree. Because especially in that scene when she wants to take him to the ice,
Right.
yeah, it's almost like you feel bad for him because he's so pathetic rather than
Yeah.
you hate him. And I wonder what the movie would be like if Elijah and Mark Ruffalo swapped roles.
I was
Because I
kind of thinking
think
that a little
right?
bit.
I think Mark might have, and we even see it in Poor Things, which just came out, but he might have more of that kinda, like, douchey energy that might make that come across more because, yeah, the way Elijah plays him, he's a douche. He's
Yeah.
so no, but, like, it's kinda coming from a place of youth and stupidity, and he's not thinking this through, Whereas, yeah, someone else might actually give him a more purposeful edge. Yeah, that's a really great point.
I think Mary is perfect, but then the other part that kind of got me too is I always forget that Mark Ruffalo's character knows about Mary's history, yet they
Mm,
still have a connection and, a relationship. He'll still sleep with her, but
mm,
he knows about it. And you know that he knows about it because when the wife pulls up, he does everything he can to stop that
yes.
situation from
Honk,
happening.
honk. Yes, and I love when the wife hits him.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I
It's
love it so
perfect,
much.
and he
Yeah.
deserves it. He deserves it
Mhm.
100%. So, it goes back to the whole Kaufman thing, which I think he's great at, and that is he's great at writing characters that may seem nice on the surface, but on the inside are rotting away. Not that
Yeah.
they're bad people, but they're rotting away. Adaptation is the perfect example of that.
Mhm.
Even Malkovich, he does it really great, where
Oh, yeah.
Cusack and Diaz have a relationship that's crumbling, not just between each other, but with themselves.
Mm.
That's where this kind of falls into that thing. And so I'm not saying that Ruffalo was miscast. I'm just saying that I I didn't hate him the way I feel like you're supposed to when you realize that he knows about the history with Mary, yet he still
Mm.
interacts with her sexually and fraternally, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
But that might be intentional, and that's why I kind of gloss it over because
Mhm.
this movie works on so many different layers, man.
Yeah, totally, yeah, and it's funny, I thought the same thing when once, the twist reveals that Mary's kissing Howard and that they actually have a history. He even says the line, "We have a history." Oh my god, creep. Like that line is so short, but it's got such impact, of course. And again, my Kirsten Dunst, I just love her. That when she is standing there in the street, she is stunned and man, that sucks. Like I feel so bad for her. And that's when I'm like, yeah, the idea of getting your memory erased sounds so helpful and such a good idea. But in that moment, when then you find out you had it erased, oh my god, it's like it's almost like, where do you even begin? What do you do, right? To piece things back together. So when she says to Stan, to Mark Ruffalo, like, "Did you know?" When she's got her box, she's moving out of the office, and he's
Yeah.
like, I think he says, like, something like, "I swear I didn't." She's like, "You didn't see anything?" And he said, "One time I saw you at his car and you looked happy." So yeah, he did know, and I remember thinking like, "Yeah, and you're, like, flirting with her, you're in your underwear, you're having sex in your client's house. You
House.
guys are
Well,
naked under
while
a
he's got
blanket,
a salad bowl on his head.
right? Yeah, the salad bowl, right? Like, oh my God, can we talk about unprofessionalism? Oh my God. So it is funny how half of our main 6 characters, are bad people. I agree. I
Yeah.
think Elijah, Mark Ruffalo, and Tom Wilkinson, they all, to varying degrees, they're not bad people, but they've done bad things. And so how interesting is it that, like, because I forgot, Kirsten Dunst, even though of course she was a star, big star at the time, of course, she got billing before the title. And I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting because she's very supporting.
Yeah.
But then when you kind of think about it, the names before the title are innocent and they
Mhm.
get their mind, blank,
Yeah.
right? And then the names after, I don't know, like, I don't know if that was it probably wasn't intentional. The names after maybe were just, I mean, Elijah Wood was huge, but it's just funny how the title divides sort of the good versus the sneaky, shady, bad people.
Well, and here's the other thing too. Like, think about it from I'm going to say the modern financial aspect of it, where we live in a country where the idea of healthcare and medicine is not to cure but to treat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's all this is, because everyone's had their mind wiped in this, yet they still go back to their baser instincts. She still is attracted to Howard. She's still fascinated by him. Joel and Clementine still are attracted to each other. It almost makes me wonder that if Lacuna Inc. actually leaves little fragments of memories behind intentionally, because you're not going to want to cure someone and have them never come back. You're going to
Mm,
want them as repeat customers. That's what healthcare is.
yeah,
And
that's true.
this is the part that even made me freak out even more. I looked up the definition of lacuna.
Mm,
The definition is to fill a gap.
wow.
So literally, they are just filling a gap in the memory that will have to be refilled eventually, is the way I interpret that.
Wow. I'm so glad you looked it up. I didn't think of doing that. Yes. Such a film scholar here, everybody. Oh my gosh. Yes, to fill a gap. Wow. This script is so good. No wonder it won the Oscar. I mean,
Yeah, it's
hello.
amazing. It's fantastic.
Is there any risk of brain damage?
Technically, the procedure is brain damage, but it's on a par with a night of heavy drinking. Nothing you'll miss.
Hi, listeners. If you're enjoying the show, please leave a rating and or a review on the podcast app you're using for Release Date Rewind. Like this video and subscribe on YouTube, and tell your friends about this discussion. We're back after the break. And speaking of the Oscars, I have to say, and I mean, I don't know, maybe because I love this movie so much, maybe I'm not thinking clearly, but it is crazy 20 years later that it only got 2 Oscar noms. I didn't look up to see what other movies, were in the running, but like it didn't even get Best Picture when like this has been on the list of best movies ever made by various critics. Like what do you make of just the 2 Oscar noms?
It's an excellent point, because you have to remember that when this came out, we were still only at 5 Best Picture nominations.
Yeah,
We didn't
true.
get 10 until 2009.
Yeah.
They had to do that because movies like this were getting so much critical attention and so much praise from the Associated Press. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
when are the Oscars going to stop being political?
Right.
When are the Oscars going to stop being Oscars so white or Oscars so black? Well, you have to give more opportunities for films like this to play.
Yeah.
Now, if this came out now, it would be a Best Picture winner, hands down. And I've used this example many times. Now that Everything Everywhere All at Once is a Best Picture winner,
Yeah.
that widens the gap or narrows it. Because in my mind this year, I said if Oppenheimer wins after Everything Everywhere wins the year after, we're going to start seeing a pattern of, okay, we're going to have avant-garde cinema take it one year, and then we're going to have traditional studio take it the next year. And then
Yep.
they're going to get called out on that, and they're going to have to readjust the formula. I mean, I've been watching this system for years, and
Mhm.
it's obvious that's what they
Yeah.
do. That's why award shows don't mean much to me, because
Yeah.
I don't give a shit if it won an Oscar or not. It's still,
Right.
in my opinion, of that year, the best movie of the year.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. Because obviously, like you said, campaigning, it's all a whole other beast. It really has nothing to do with best picture or best whatever, right?
Right.
Yeah. And even I'm even thinking of like the year Moonlight won, and then I think the year after it was Green Book, which was a much more like bigger
Traditional
budget,
studio
traditional.
picture,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yep. Yep.
With a
So you're
political
right.
message, yeah.
Yep. Flipping back and forth. Yeah, totally. But I just was so surprised. I was like, wait, it was Kate Winslet got a deserving nom for this, and then writing. I'm like, that's it. Like, not even edit. Well, I guess I could see if maybe people didn't love the editing because it's not the continuity isn't perfect. There's some shots out of order. Apparently, the shoot I was reading, was hard, and of course with such a, you know, interesting, quirky, strange movie with such strange visuals, I'm sure it's hard to line everything up perfectly.
Well,
So,
especially when you're doing it in camera and practical,
right,
being
yeah.
you're not relying on digital to fix everything.
Amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. What are some of your favorite visuals? Are there any moments that, like, you love when you're watching this movie? Because there are such beautiful, crazy, strange images.
I love this question because I was already a huge fan of Michel Gondry and I'd
Mm,
seen Human Nature.
right.
I knew how visual of a guy he was. Sometimes I get worried about music video or let's say performance art or artistic video filmmakers that when they get
Mhm.
their chance to make something for a feature that they're masturbatory in their style.
Yeah,
I've seen it happen. Like I've seen it
yeah,
happen with, I mean, Michael Bay is a perfect example of that, where,
yeah.
okay, you're a music video director throughout the 80s and now you're making the biggest bombastic shit ever. Like that's a perfect example of that. So
Mhm.
I feel that Gondry is actually really restrained here compared
Mm,
to Human Nature or Science of Sleep. Science of
mm.
Sleep was where he was able to get all crazy
He
and
got a
nutty with
little
it.
crazy, yeah.
So the things that I appreciated visually in this movie, I loved the whole scene of like him in the street as the memories are being wiped and Clementine's on one corner and then he turns and then she's on the other.
Yes.
I love the visuals of when he's starting to forget faces and they're just
Yeah.
the stretched out blurs because
Uh-huh.
I've had dreams like that where if I'm trying to remember someone or if I'm trying to put someone in a dream or in a memory and if I can't create their face, I essentially make them faceless. And
Mhm.
I think enough people have had that experience that it makes its way into the script.
Yeah.
Um, and then I really, really dig when they're in the Barnes and Noble as it's getting wiped away, and
Yes.
it's essentially just shot with one spotlight, and everything else is black behind as it's getting erased. Essentially,
Right.
it doesn't have to be impressive; it just has to be impactful, and
Oh,
that's
yeah.
the way I looked at it.
I agree. That scene I had forgotten because I remembered the earlier Barnes& and Noble scene when he goes to see Clem and she has no idea who he is, right? And then
Right?
we see Elijah Wood, his face is obscured, but she's got a boyfriend. And so when he walks away, we see the lights, shut off behind him. And
Yeah,
then he walks right back into David Cross and Jane Addams' house. I was
yeah,
like, whoa. So
yeah.
that's a great visual. But yes, the second Barnes and Noble scene, or maybe third, I think it's the second one. Yeah, when it's him and Clem talking, and you're so right, Antonio, and it's very subtle. It took me a couple seconds to realize, oh, the books all around them are just going white.
They're just
They're
going
just going
white. Mhm.
right. And it's slow. And you're right. It's not a big, crazy visual, but it's so impactful because slowly the memory is disintegrating,
Mhm.
right? Yeah. Love it.
That baby's history.
It's all being wiped away. They're erasing you, Clem. You'll be gone by morning.
Here are some of the visuals I love. I mean, it's iconic. It's an obvious one, but just them waking up in bed right there in Montauk on the snowy beach. What an image. Like that to me is sort of the movie and how he's so confused and she's a little excited by it.
Yeah,
Crazy. I love that. I love them in the sink in the they're taking a bath when they're like
yeah.
babies, right?
And he's
That's
Baby Joel under the table.
exactly. Oh, I know, and I love when she's loving her dress that's kinda 60s, 70s. She's like, "Who am I?" And he says, "You're Mrs. Hamlin, the neighbor." And she's like, "This is so warped," right?
I want my mommy. This is sort of warped.
That's a fun scene for sure. My favorite scene of the whole movie is towards the end. They're in that big, dark beach house. They break in, and he's remembering how they first said goodbye to each other, and it's
Mhm.
crumbling. And I think there was maybe some CGI, at least
Yeah.
on the outside, maybe, right? It looks like it. But there's sand on the floor, it's crumbling. And I just love their dialogue and how he's so nervous, she's so confident and she wants to I think the homeowners names are Ruth and someone and she's like, I'll be Ruth, and she's going upstairs and he's like, I really got to go, I should really go, and she says, so go. And for whatever reason, especially when I was younger, that the dialogue there really hit me, and I think it really opened my eyes to how our tone when we speak to each other, especially when we're crushing on each other, when it's a
Yeah.
newer relationship or flirting, our tone can make or break the night. It can make or break if this is going to continue. And so her tone, so go, it turns him off a bit. He walks away. And I just love, and also I love the use of kind of like a blinding spotlight on them inside. It happens there.
Yeah.
It happens when we see the kind of weird, blurred, faceless faces in the doctor's office, where like you can see our actors are squinting. It's almost like, it's like the dentist light in your face when you're going to see the dentist, but like times 10, that blinding kind of medical light on your face, I think is an interesting choice to do in some of these scenes,
Well, I like that fact because I think it's the way that, essentially how we create memories and perceptions is we focus on what's in front of us, right? Our
Yeah.
peripheral is just there to support where we're at and our
Mhm.
situational surroundings. But whatever's to the left and right of me, unless I'm familiar with that space, it's just window dressing, right? What's
Yeah.
directly in front of me, like your face on this screen, that's what I'm going to
Right.
remember at the end of the night, not the things that were going on around me. And I think that's the analogy that that spotlight represents
Mm,
is you are seeing the things that my memory said, this is important because it's right in front of me. Everything that happened around me is just dressing for the scene.
yeah. That's true. Really good point for sure. Yeah, you're gonna only focus mostly straight ahead, of course.
I loved you on this day. Please let me keep this memory.
I think the scenes that stick to me or the dialogue that stick to me are the things that I've experienced in real life. And that's not to say that bad experiences aren't helpful and you becoming a healthier person and recognizing boundaries and things like that. When they're having Chinese food
Mm,
and he is like turned off by the way she's chewing loud and he doesn't want her playing with the food and then she's pouring more beer and like, oh great, she's gonna be drunk and stupid soon, as if this is a pattern recognition. It's something that happens regularly.
right.
Like those are feelings I felt for people, not even necessarily a partner, but like a friend or a parent. And it just goes to show how much raw emotion actually is in this script. So it's when Kaufman really has his characters look at the things that they find despicable about each other.
Mm,
I think that's when the movie's its most honest because everything
mm,
else is kind of fantasy, right? The whole idea is fantasy. The romance is fantasy. The reality is the things that people don't like about each other.
yeah.
And that's what really gets me with this script.
Ah, yes, totally. Love that. I'm just looking through my notes and I realized, yeah, her blue hair color, you're so right. Going back to the colors and the timeline, she says it's called Blue Ruin. So of course, that's a little not, and then she says that early in the film, right? And so
Hmm.
that's a clue that it's like, actually, this is, they just broke up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even when she's a very fast shot. I love when she's pulled away, they're on the ice, and that memory is starting to fade, and, like, she's looking at the camera, and she just slides backwards,
Great
you
shot.
know?
Yeah.
Great shot, and running, it's so interesting to be running from, the blankness coming at you, because then he's grabbing her, and it's just it gets so complicated in such a beautiful way because then not only are they in the memories, right? And it kind of
Mhm.
complicates the timeline for us, and we're trying to make sense of it all. They're in the memories, talking to each other to run to other memories, that. And apparently, Charlie Kaufman had a hard time, I read online somewhere, figuring that out. Like he was apparently struggling where it's like, well, once it gets to the point where Joel is having second thoughts. He wants this over. He's gonna try to flee and memory hop. He's like, how do I do that where now they're talking to each other? So like first it's Clementine in the memory, but then it's her like a new version. So that is complicated. I could see that being hard to work out.
I've got one last thing that I only noticed this last rewatch.
Yeah.
And that is how much this movie really plays with language and actually gives you a lot of clues to these people based on language.
Mm-hmm.
And in the first 5 minutes, I think that Kaufman puts it all together for you, but you don't realize it until later. And that's why I love the rewatchability of movies. And I get
Yes.
so angry at critics who tear stuff apart the first time. It's like, watch it a few times.
Right.
There's two words that these characters use that describe who they are and what this movie is really about. For Joel, things are nice. He wants things to be nice. For him, nice is content. And for Clementine, her word is fantastic. It's fantastical. It's beyond reality. She's not happy unless things feel fantastical. But Joel just wants things to be nice. If they could meet somewhere in between, great. But I don't think they can change who they are. And I think he gives that away at that very first meeting in the car where he said tonight was nice. And she's like, just nice? No, it was like the most fucking fantastic night of my life. And then she uses the word fantastic all throughout the movie. It's really giving you a clue to who these people are and who they always will be. And that's why that's one of the things I only recognized this last viewing. And I'm like, damn it. Like Kaufman is so good at this.
Yeah, great observation. You're right. And the use of nice irks her like immediately. Like when they're on that train, she's like, nice? Like, I don't want to be nice, like, so yeah, instantly their favorite words don't go well. Yeah. Great observation.
The eraser guys are coming here. Wake yourself up.
Well, that's working like gangbusters.
I need somewhere deeper.
And going back to how this movie has such great rewatchability, I love, and I smiled to myself early on when he's in Montauk for the first time, at least in the movie, he's writing in his notebook. He's like about to draw, and he says, his narration, a page is ripped out. I don't remember doing that. Right. Clue. Cause then later on, of course, he's ripping drawings of her out of there, for the procedure. Yeah. So good. Even though the script is amazing, as we're saying, I guess apparently apparently everyone except Jim Carrey, I heard, was allowed to improvise. And you can kind of feel that. I could feel it the most with, I'll just call them like, well,
the trio.
I was going to say the trio. I was going to say the youngsters because
100%,
Elijah,
100%,
Kirsten, but when they're high and like, again, I know I'm a broken record, but I just love Kirsten. And when she's like talking about how she's hungry and I forget what she's saying on the couch there, where like things are starting to freak out with the procedure, and Mark Ruffalo's putting his clothes back on. Yes, I could feel there was an essence of just like fun and they're laughing for real.
Yeah.
Yes. But I guess Gondry wanted Jim Carrey to stick more to the script to maybe kind of irk him a little bit, since obviously he's a comedian, he wants to kind of play, so to maybe get him a little agitated. And I guess Gondry never really likes to say the word action, so that would also kind of create a little bit of confusion, a little bit of chaos, because they would be rolling and things would start and that would kind of get Jim Carrey like shocked. But it works really well. I guess they were really apparently Jim Carrey and Gondry had their moments of not doing so well, and Tom Wilkinson apparently did not like working on this movie, never really knew what was going on. So, but I guess in a weird way it all was perfect because they're agitated when they need to be, they're confused, right?
It's controlled chaos, and that's sometimes what makes the most entertaining movies.
Amen. You said it. Well, Antonio, thank you so much. This was so much fun. I feel like
thank you.
We got to nerd out. I got to learn from you. Everyone's probably going to message me saying, wow, you need to have Antonio on way more. Look at this film scholar, right?
Anytime, man. Anytime.
Absolutely. I appreciate your time. So where can people find your show? On Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of it?
It's everywhere. It's on YouTube now. All my shows are on YouTube.
Yep.
The easiest way to find me, guys, is go to thecultworthy.com. Because that's got links. It's got links to all the shows, all the YouTube channels, and it's got links to all the partners I've ever had on the show, like other podcasters. So if you listen to someone that you liked, well, my show will have a link to their show, and then you can find them. Just keeping, that channel of growth going.
Eternal sunshine of the spotless mind.
And my last question for you. So, would you ever want to see, apparently there's been talk of a Eternal Sunshine musical, an Eternal Sunshine TV show. Back in 2016, they announced it, but I guess that all fell apart. And apparently Charlie Kaufman has sort of told maybe Michel Gondry, I think I saw, that like he did have an idea for a sequel. What do you think? I feel like I don't need to see any of that. I mean, maybe a musical, that could be fun, a stage musical someday, maybe. But I feel like what they have is perfect. I don't need to see a continuation or a new version. Would you want to see any of that?
I tell you what I would want to see, because I'm a sucker for background things getting their own spin-off or show. I would like to see a show about Lacuna itself. Like maybe if it became like a bigger industry and then all the things that went on. Kind of like what Westworld did, where we cared less about the robots and focused more on, Delos, the company that was actually making them. I like that. So
wow, I'm into that.
Just call it Lacuna Inc.
Yes, I would. Yeah, exactly. Lacuna Inc. And it could almost even be, it could be a prequel. It could be set during this story, just, about other people. Or it also could be interesting if it actually is sort of a sequel show. And they talk about, oh, this woman, this, young disgruntled employee, like tried to bring the company down, but we're good now. And just to see how what is it like nowadays with, I don't know, cell phones and all this stuff, that could be interesting to see it updated. Yeah.
Someone franchises it, and that's now like in every state, on every street corner.
Yeah, and then there's an episode about like a true like teenager wants to do it,
Right.
like I'm sure the rule probably would be like 18, but it's like, oh my god, 18, like you're too young, you don't know what you want, right? Yeah, you could almost, it could almost be like, instead of problem of the week, it's like patient of the week or something, and then with some through lines. Yeah.
Call
wow,
us,
Antonio.
Charlie. We got
Right,
ideas.
exactly. Hey Charlie, copyright. Yeah, exactly. I love it. Thank you, everyone, for listening to or watching this episode of Release Date Rewind, and I hope you remember it well. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind never made it to #1 at the box office, but like many movies I talk about on this show, that doesn't really matter, because there's a reason we're talking about it and still loving it decades later. And in case you didn't know, the original ending in the script was different than what we got in the finished film. Joel was to walk away from Clementine, leaving their relationship in the past. I do love what we got in the finished film, I have to say. Big thank you to Antonio Palacios for being a great guest. And like he mentioned earlier, folks, you can check out his Cultworthy Cinema podcast and his other podcasts at thecultworthy.com. Thanks also to Straw Hat Media, Kyle Motzinger, Greg Clements, and Portland Media Center. Follow me on Instagram, everybody, at Release Date Rewind to see more content from this chat and from this great movie. And next time, we're celebrating Mother's Day a little early this year. John Waters style. Hint, hint. Until we meet again.